Edouard Stoka, who will be talking about classic brainstorming threat modeling versus threat modeling tools.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you.
Can you get a little bit closer?
Yes. Oh, I have also. So just a brief introduction. I have 20 plus years of experience in IT. I'm doing application security for 15 years. And I don't know how many years I'm doing threat modeling because I didn't knew it was actually threat modeling. I was before on the other side of the border as a project manager and application architect, and I was doing threat modeling back then without knowing it was actually threat modeling. So today's topic is the comparison between classic brainstorming, threat modeling, and automated threat modeling through tools. And the lesson learned. So in order to do that, you need the stars to be aligned. What I mean by that? In other words, it's having a large collection of applications which have been threat modeled by experts and having access to the best threat modeling tools in order to do the comparison. So the threat modeling, it's ADP, the company I'm working for. ADP, in brief, is one of the leaders in human capital management. It consists of payroll, talent, and so on. And in the United States, it's also a financial institution. The company has more than 1 million clients in 140 countries. And something which is important to stress is the fact that HR is completely specific to every country, laws and regulations. And this is why we have 1,000 products and 900 software development teams all around the world. So the Threat Modeling at Scale program was launched back in 2022, and it won't surprise anybody here in this room that the expected outcomes were to reduce delays for software development from security rework, minimize introduced vulnerabilities if you had the chance to do threat modeling before starting to coding and not for legacy products, and of course drive increased efficiency through consistent security requirements generation, and of course assessment. And this coupled to test validation of the security requirements that have been identified during the threat modeling process. So the objectives are to train the 900 ADP dev teams. We have reached more than half of this objective, and having the 1,000 products threat modeled and regularly updated. And of course, tracking the remediations that have been identified. The remediation of the vulnerabilities identified through the threat modeling. Something I will say about the training program, which has been developed by ADP security teams with the contribution of 2 consulting firms, and it's based on STRIDELM. So the key success factor for threat modeling adoption in ADP. First one is a top-down decision at company levels. This ensures that in every business line and in every product development team, the threat modeling is not only encouraged but enforced, and this is absolutely necessary. An excellent preparation for trainers. Trainers in ADP go through Train the Trainers program, which is very precise, detailed. We assist to threat modeling sessions, training sessions, just as viewer, then as co-leader, and in the end, we reach the level of being real trainers, threat modeling trainers. Then an excellent training content with live collaborative STRIDELM threat modeling of teams on application. And about that, I would like to share with you a feedback. Before joining ADP, I was persuaded that thinking like an attacker to do the best sort of threat modeling was something that either you have it in your blood, in your DNA, either it's very difficult to achieve this task. And I was very surprised and very happily surprised that thanks to the training content and also, of course, also to the level of the trainers, this is something that is actually achievable. And in all the trainings that I did in ADP, I had the chance to see that the security champions and the developers which attended those trainings were actually able to develop this skill of thinking like an attacker. The training content is updated monthly. First of all, at the end of each training session, we forced the security champions and developers to fill a survey. And then we have several channels like regular weekly sessions, WebEx sessions with the trained people where they can make us feedbacks, ask questions, and so on. We have also dedicated threads on WebEx where people can ask whatever question they need. And of course, one of the key success factors is the remediation tracking of the vulnerabilities which have been identified, because it's very well to have a threat modeling program, but then if the teams and their management do not allow the time to fix their vulnerabilities and to implement the security requirements, well, it's useless. So the next step is the automated threat modeling in ADP. So why moving towards an automated threat modeling process? Well, the manual one is working very well. So increasing consistency worldwide, as we have 900 development teams around the world, you can imagine that application security governance is a real challenge compared to other companies which have maybe 5, 6, 7 silos, and everything is done in the same way in every silo. We have 900 development teams in dozens of countries, so it's very difficult to enforce the same security requirements worldwide. So this is one of the advantages of using a tool, and the tool will have always the same security requirements no matter the country, etc. Of course, there are specifics like GDPR or whatever, but this is one of the main advantages. Then consistent application architecture diagrams, thanks to the tool, and I have to admit, a bit surprised that a lot of software development teams do not actually design, draw any application diagram. So this is also a big advantage, because we enforce all of them to design those application architecture diagrams. And I think that a lot of people among you also use the application diagrams to do threat modeling. Centralized remediation tracking, which of course is our work in application security governance. An automated reporting system as well. And of course, helping the AppSec governance, which is something very challenging, as I already told you. So the selection of the threat modeling tool. So the project started in October 2022. We had more than 120 evaluation criteria regrouped in 10 categories, including access management, product onboarding, methodologies, and threats framework. And this led us to a short list of 3 tools, some diagram-based and some survey-based. The score of the 3 shortlisted tools were too close to finalize a decision just on that. So we added additional criteria, which are user feedbacks, and detailed evaluations after live hands-on sessions where we compare the 3 tools, and pushing the tools to the limits on the threat engines and the noise comparison. So I will make a focus on the impact of noise. So tools catch a lot more vulnerabilities than humans do. So when selecting a tool, it's important to focus on the noise. So I will take an expression used by Jeff Williams, who is one of the co-founders of OWASP, and he has written in an article, he's talked about noisy crickets and quiet crickets. So the noisy crickets are the tools that identify 100% of true positive, but with an excessive false positive rate. So you have to invest a lot of time by actually seeing which are the true positive instead of the false positive. So this is not real automation, because you spend even more time than doing manual human threat modeling. So this is a no-go. And the quiet crickets, which are the opposite. So an ideal tool should be something in between those 2 extremes. So contrary to code scanning like SAST tool, for example, where there is an OWASP benchmark that you can use to test and to compare the several code scanning tools. In the threat modeling, there is no such a thing as an OWASP benchmark that you can ingest in the tools to compare them. So the tools evaluation is only based on manual testing. And of course, having too much noise can be a deal breaker. So for the adoption of an automated tool. So this is why we invest time in comparing those tools on this noise. So this also allows us to understand the mechanism of the threat engines which are behind each tool we have tested. And the key takeaways for noise. So how effective is the threat engine in taking into account specific architecture patterns? If, for example, a tool, software threat modeling, you ingest in 2 different diagrams, 2 different threat models, and the threats are exactly the same, then probably it's not the best choice. Then how easy it is to customize threat rules to limit false positive. All the tools generate false positive, and you have to tweak them. And how easy it is the customization process. And then, are there any hidden assumptions, questions that can be easily unlocked or modified? For example, when studying those tools, we're pushing them to the limits, I discovered that one of them was assuming that once you have data in your software, in your application, it was concerned by GDPR, where only applications which use personal information are subject to GDPR regulations, for example, for the Europe. So this is something that you have to deep dive in to understand if there are those kind of assumptions, and are they unlockable, and can they be modified. So those are important takeaways for the noise. And of course, how easy it is to manage false positive in the tool when they occur. So the key success factors for threat modeling tool adoption. In ADP, we have chosen the tool and we have already started the implementation of this automated tool. So, of course, the user friendliness. Is the tool easy to use? And is it possible to use templates? For example, for very common architectures that are used in the company, and it will be a starting point for the teams, and then they will add upon this template additional components, for example. And it's also a way, using templates, to identify false positive before actually giving those templates to the teams. For example, because the company has already security baselines and you know perfectly that these kind of threats cannot apply to the company, and so you spare time by disabling such or such threats in those templates. Another key success factor is the ramp up. So if the tool is rich and complex, and believe me, all the 3 shortlisted tools have a lot of features, is it possible to have a multi-stage maturity level, meaning that, for example, first level with just simple features, and a second level with the whole package of features. And for example, the first level will be for the beginning, and after 6 or 12 months of maturity, the teams will have access to the whole bunch of features. And then the third key success factor is the easiness to manage false positive, as I have mentioned in the noise part. So how easy it is to manage them. So what about the vulnerabilities that humans catch and the tools don't? So, of course, there are vulnerabilities that humans catch and no tool can catch at all. So, what was my methodology to evaluate them? I used an extraction of dozens of ADP applications which were manually threat modeled, and these there were 122 associated vulnerabilities for those dozen of ADP applications. And I threat modeled those applications in the 3 shortlisted tools. And I analyzed each list of threats generated by the 3 tools to see if the 132 vulnerabilities caught by humans were caught by at least one of the 3 tools. And the result is that 36% of the 132 vulnerabilities caught by humans are invisible to the leading threat modeling tools. And most of those vulnerabilities are business abuse cases. So, are there any bias in my study? Of course, because all those applications are ADP applications. They're not all related to HR, and I would admit that most of those vulnerabilities are not related to the HR business, also because we have also even financial applications. And the training that we offer to our security champions stress a lot the business abuse cases, because this is something that it's the power of the developers, the power of the product owners who attend those trainings. And those business abuse cases can only be identified by people who knows what we're talking about in terms of content, in terms of functional content, how the application works, what are the type of data which are used, how you process them, and so on. So sure, there is this sort of bias because we focus on what I would say, the most value-added threat modeling that we can achieve in a company. So, my own conclusion, and I stress the fact that those are my views and not those of my employer. Automated threat modeling has several advantages when selecting the right tool. The most important ones are bringing consistency in terms of security requirements, having a centralized tracking system for the remediation of the vulnerabilities, and helping the AppSec governance, especially in companies like ADP with so many development teams. And the manual threat model should be done for the most critical applications in addition to the automated one. I mean, once the company has chosen the path of automated threat modeling, you should also continue to do manual threat modeling, at least for the most critical application, to identify the so-called business abuse cases, which might be the most easy one for hackers. Those business abuse cases are often the one which need the least hacking tools. So this is my own conclusion on this comparison between automated and manual threat modeling. So, do you have any questions?
What's your tool?
Well, this is an agnostic conference, so I can tell you, but off the record.
I'm sure he was first, but yeah, so many hands went up so quickly.
Thank you so much. It was impressive. So, as a project manager, you mentioned this. Have you done any comparison from resources and time spent using the tool or doing the manual threat modeling? Because it's also a valuable parameter to compare.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a tool which wasn't the one we selected, which was way easier to use and way faster to use. But the result was not specific enough to our applications, meaning that two different applications, when you ingest them in that tool, leads to the same threats. So that wasn't useful enough. And also the hands-on testing were absolutely necessary to see the actual feedback from users. One thing that I've learned through this project is, and I don't want to be too generic, is the difference between leading projects in the United States and leading projects in Europe. For example, in the United States, you have to go fast. You have to obtain quick successes. But the success often ends at the end of the project, and there is not the adoption taking into consideration with the project. Whereas in Europe, project can take 2 years for selecting a security product, whatever it is, SaaS, threat modeling, whatever. It can take up to 2 years, and you cover all the drawbacks that can happen for the tool. And the good, from my perspective, the good solution is in between those 3 months project and 24 months project. So we had to negotiate with the HQ, which of course is American one, because ADP is an American company, to have more time, especially to do those hands-on exercise. They weren't very quick because we had to compare 3 tools. And from a team to another, we changed the order of the tools, because of course the first tool that the new team will try will seems to be harder to understand than the second and the third. And so by doing this process, we ensured that the actual votes that the team gave to the tools on 12 different topics of evaluation were consistent. So, does it answer your question?
Most, thanks.
Thank you.
Did you have a question too? Because I thought I saw your hand as well.
Oh,
I answered? Okay, good.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the topic, definitely very interesting. I have a question about customization. So you mentioned basically using customization to suppress false positives, but I'm also interested in the other side of customization where maybe you can add a custom rule. So you mentioned like business use cases or business abuse cases. So I'm interested to know, did you see in any of these tools a way to, let's say, add a specific logic? Let's say if you have that specific architecture or pattern, then always add that threat and that specific maybe corresponding mitigation to the generated threat?
Well, it's possible depending on the tool. Not all the tools have this sort of pattern. that can be analyzed, defined, and then analyzed, and then having threats associated. In theory, you can. Well, at least it's something that it's written on the commercials. But the reality is that it's very complicated to design those patterns in one of the three tools, which is the only one which make advertisement on this business logic feature. I would say that it's possible, but you have to invest a lot of time in it. And when you have 1,000 products which are very different one from another, well, the ROI is hard to see. If you're in a bank, for example, and all your products, all your software application are based on the same logic, on the same business logic, well then yes, it could be interesting to invest time on those patterns which leads to threats and mitigations.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. It was very interesting. One thing that I maybe missed is you talk about what the tools actually missed. What did they give you on top of what you've done manually?
Well, this would need a lot more time invested because the tools catch in number a lot more vulnerabilities than human can catch in, say, a 2-hour threat modeling session, which is a time which is usually needed in ADP to threat model a product during the training session. Then we encourage them to invest even more time by looking even deeper in the tool, but probably the tools identify 5 to 10 more vulnerabilities than the human does. But I won't mention the criticality. But they catch a lot more vulnerabilities than human does, and this is also an advantage because in ADP we have standards in application security, and it's dozens of pages. So enforcing the security requirements around 900 product development teams all around the world is very challenging, and so the tool actually help to enforce a lot of security requirements. Some could consider them basic security requirements, but unfortunately a lot of software development teams don't think about them. They just either they never read the papers, the standards, either they have forgot about them. So it ensures that all the security requirements are applied, or at least they are in a list of a to-do list for the coding.
So if we use, for example, the pen test as a ground rule, saying what we actually found in the pen test is, let's call it the baseline of what is severe and should be fixed. It's not a perfect assumption, but let's do that for a second. Would you say that the benefits of such a tool overweigh the false negative, or are you saying realistically we're still doing the manual assessment as our main category and the tools are more of the right way to track it and organize it?
This is a great question, and this is also why I invest several slides on the noise, because the noise can be a deal breaker. The manual threat modeling is 100% accurate. When you correctly train the security champions, it's 100% accurate. There won't be any false positive. Whereas in the tools, every tool on the market identify so-called false positive. So once you have selected the right one, which allow you a good customization, also with the help of the vendor, and creating patterns, for example, architecture templates with all this false positive cleaned up because of, for example, the baseline, security baseline in the company, which allows us to be sure that those threats will never apply. Then, yes, you gain more time than the one that you spend for the residual false positive that the tool will identify. But this equation is very tricky, and in order to be sure about the result, you have to invest the time. And this is also one of the key points that we use to convince the executive of ADP to allow us more time. Because if at the end you have selected one of the best tools in the market, but it cannot be applied because people will say, oh no, 90% is false positive, then you've lost everything. So this is one of the sentences, the topics, the key things that we use to convince the executive to dive even deeper into tools analysis.
We have time for one more question.
I'm really curious about the architecture diagrams or the questionnaires and how you standardize that, and whether you went to more, because that in and of itself is a topic amongst software architects, or what you get. Did you standardize on data flow diagrams, one or more per solution, and how the tools adapted and how the software architects adapted to the tools?
Well, there are several questions in your question.
We probably won't have time for all of them. So.
First, the fact that we train more than half of the teams with the STRIDE methodology, it means that we need DFD, we need data flow diagrams. So our choice was also based on this present situation in ADP. So the choice was on diagram-based tool. And so the tool also allows us to enforce the DFD creation among all the teams, even the not that few ones that have never created any application diagram, application architecture diagram.
And which are these three tools?
As I said, it's an agnostic conference, but if you want, I can tell them at the break lunch.
Over drinks or. Yeah, all right, well, with that, please join me in thanking Edouard Stoka.